History books lie to you. They sell Napoleon as a romantic hero, sword in hand on a rearing horse, conquering impossible hills. But Napoleon Bonaparte didn't conquer Europe solely with steel. He brought the continent to its knees with signatures, wax seals, and ledgers. Behind the deafening roar of cannon fire, the deadliest but quietest machine in history was at work. Treasury clerks, notaries, bankers, and disciplined bureaucrats with pens in hand. Napoleon managed numbers with the same strict discipline his generals commanded their regiments. The bitter truth most rulers never understand, he realized from birth as a Corsican. You can defeat an enemy with a season of warfare, but you can only bring them to their knees if your financial backbone is stronger than theirs. Here's the truth. School desks never taught you. Transforming a bankrupt, shattered France into an economic dragon strong enough to set the world on fire for 15 years through financial engineering. At the end of the 18th century, France was a wreck, gasping under the guise of fine clothes. The Bourbon monarchy had cracked under the weight of palace luxury and senseless war debts. When the revolution came, it toppled the monarchy but could not destroy arithmetic. The new regime tried to save the country with paper banknotes called assignats, backed by nothing. It was the greatest financial hallucination history had ever seen. At first, it seemed like magical liquidity. Soon it became runaway inflation. By the mid-1790s, prices were exploding. People could not buy bread with the money in their hands, and the army marched in wooden shoes. Trust was dead. When Napoleon emerged as first consul in 1799, he was not merely a soldier. He was a system designer. The first thing he saw was this. To command an army, you must first command a currency. He did something completely contrary to the anarchic spirit of the Revolution. He founded the Bank of France, Banque de France. But this bank was neither a royal playground nor a printing press for politicians. It was a hybrid beast, combining private investors' capital with state authority. The message was clear. Your politics may change, but the value of your money will not. Trust is not built with speeches. It is built with physical reality. In 1803, Napoleon introduced the Germinal franc. This currency was directly tied to the weight of gold and silver. After years of paper mirages, the French people knew exactly what they held in their hands. This was not a fashion choice. It was a social contract. Bakers selling bread, soldiers receiving pay, merchants lending credit, all knew what tomorrow would bring. Napoleon took money out of politicians' hands and put it in the hands of mathematics. Yet money is only as strong as the tax system behind it. He ended the old regime's tax farming, the disastrous outsourcing of tax collection. Leaving tax collection to individuals is an open invitation to theft, he said, and ensured the state collected its own revenues. He built a system on 4 pillars: land, movable property, professions, and consumption taxes. Inspectors no longer roamed with bribe sacks. They carried cadastral registers with precise measurements. In 1807, he established the Court of Accounts, the eye that watched every penny of the state. For Napoleon, oversight was not an accessory. It was the central nervous system of the empire. What made Napoleon truly modern and terrified his rivals was that he structured war as a cash flow mechanism. For him, a campaign was not just about gaining territory on a map. It was a revenue event. Massive indemnities were collected from every defeated state. When Prussia was crushed in 1806, it wasn't only its army that dissolved. Its treasury was also transferred to Paris. Occupied territories were required to feed the French army stationed there. In other words, the front lines paid for themselves. Napoleon protected the French treasury from the harshest costs of war because he automated a system where war fed war. He acted with the same pragmatism when selling Louisiana to the U.S. for $15 million. I prefer cash in my pocket and a strengthened ally against the English over a territory I cannot defend. The Napoleonic Code is often mentioned, but its financial power is frequently overlooked. Napoleon standardized property rights and contract law, loading Europe's economic fabric with an operating system. When courts issued predictable rulings, credit revived. A merchant in Lyon knew that a note he held would have the same legal weight in Antwerp. This standardization turned regional markets into a single enormous economic pool. Napoleon provided financial oxygen to the lands he conquered with his sword. Yet, like every genius, Napoleon had a blind spot. He believed he could suppress market dynamics with force. The continental system, created to crush England, marked the beginning of his financial downfall. He tried to close European ports to British goods, but for a power without naval dominance, this was like shooting himself in the foot. Economies do not like coercion. They work with incentives. The blockade killed port cities, impoverished allies, and turned smuggling into Europe's most profitable sector. The more inspectors and penalties Napoleon sent, the more the market found cracks. A colossal lesson for modern leaders. Coercion cannot replace the economy. If you try to keep a continent poor by force, that continent will eventually destroy your system. The 1812 Russian campaign was not only a military disaster, but also the greatest accounting catastrophe in history. The dead were not just soldiers under snow, they were expensive human capital in which the state had invested for years. The lost hundreds of thousands of horses were the evaporation of logistics mobility nurtured by the treasury for years. Russia's cold froze Napoleon's war feeds war financial model. In an instant, the model reversed. External income ceased and all the treasury's reserves poured into this bottomless pit. When creditors lost trust, Napoleon's greatest strength, credit and confidence, collapsed. When Napoleon was exiled to St. Helena in 1815, he left not ruins, but the financial blueprint of the modern world. Today, the structures every modern state possesses, central banks, courts of accounts, professional tax agencies, standardized legal codes, emerge from Napoleon's workshop. He proved that money is not just a piece of paper, but a form of energy reflecting the will of the state. Napoleon's story is not a dusty history lesson. He is a guide to the inevitable and dangerous marriage of power and money. Napoleon lived with a map and a ledger. He ruled the world as long as the lines on the map matched the numbers in the ledger. When the numbers rejected the map, history set him aside as a warning. Look around. Even today, wars start in bank corridors. Sanctions are used as ammunition. And states whose money does not inspire confidence are doomed to history's dusty pages, no matter the size of their territories. History does not repeat itself, but it always crushes those who do not understand mathematics. The world is shaped not by those who talk the most, but by those who plan the best. Keep the show for others, the real power for yourself. Old money, the great wealth hidden in silence.